How about if I just start at the beginning? You could be honest.
Because you know what? They have the sweat equity that went into that memory that they're making with their friends and family. And that's what's important with us. And that's what the I Am Real World's about.
Well, that's a great question. You know, one of the best things about a spring food plot is you get a second chance if it fails.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins. Brought to you by buyafarm.com, your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. By tapping into Don's years of experience, dedication, and commitment, Chasing Giants focuses on the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails. Now, here is Don and co-host Terry Pear.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants. Don, this is episode 75, brought to you by buyafarm.com. Can you believe we're already at episode 75?
No, they're rolling along. The number keeps racking up each week, so it won't be long. We'll be on 100.
Yeah, it's been a ride. It's gone by really quick since we first started this little venture, and crazy how it's grown. We're getting a lot of support, and we really appreciate it. Only a few haters, and I guess that's normal. If we're not making somebody mad and making somebody send us nasty messages and blocking us on Facebook, we're not doing our job.
Yeah,
because we had one of those this week.
Yeah, and I still don't know what the guy's issue was, but he ripped into me. It was about 20 posts and on private message, and it's like I went clear back to the beginning. This has been going on for a while, and I still don't know what the guy's mad about.
Yeah, it's odd, but why don't you talk a little bit about one of the cool things that we just received as a little gift for us? It's pretty cool.
You're going to have to refresh my memory, Terry. I spent my whole week thinking about
the video that the guy made for us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, our buddy Brian Rusk. He put together a nice video basically for real world, planting plots and such on his farm in Wisconsin. And, Brian was at the master class and stayed over to help us burn a switchgrass field.
Yep.
And then he went home, put together this video, and very nice. I sent it to you, and you just about lost it, but you finally it turned back up on your desk this week, and you got a chance to watch it.
Yeah, you gave it to me on an SD card, and unfortunately, I didn't label the SD card, and it got put into the mix of probably the 85, 90 SD cards that I have floating around. So I found it this week and got to watch it for the first time. So really cool. I mean, for guys to take special or, time away from what they're doing to do that kind of stuff, it means a lot. And I think, why don't we'll just tell everybody to watch your social media, and we'll post this thing on there. It's really cool. It's got a lot of drone footage, and I thought it was just a special gift that he did for us. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, he definitely put some time into it. It's definitely worth sharing, so we'll do that.
So what's been going on this week aside from the wedding? We'll get back around to the wedding here, but how's trail camera action been?
Well, there was one day I got 5 cameras up on different properties, and that was about it for the week. I checked a few. I'll tell you what, if I had to give a buck report for this summer from what I've seen so far, I am sadly disappointed in the bucks that I've got so far on camera. Mm-hmm. And a lot of bucks in the 3-4-year-old range, they're score from like say 130 to 150.
Yep.
But I'm just not seeing that many bucks that are bigger than that. I mean, I've got 2 or 3, but it's been very disappointing, put it that way, because there were some bucks that I was expecting to blow up this year. They were at that 4 going from 4 to 5 or whatever, and some of those bucks disappeared. I had one good buck that I had high hopes for. He actually went backwards. And he's an older buck that's on my place, the 5x6 buck that you're very familiar with.
Yep.
He's always had, since he's been 3 or 4 years old. He'll be 8 this year, actually.
You have a picture of him already, though?
I did get a picture of him this week, and checked the camera where he spends his summer. And he's always been a 5x6, I think, since he was 3 years old. Well, this year he's a 5x4. He lost a point on each side, and doesn't look like he's near as big as what he has been in the past. So that buck went backwards. Some other nice bucks that were 3 and 4 last year have just totally disappeared. So I'm guessing, they probably got killed, or at least some of them did.
Yeah, we never know. I've experienced the same thing here in Kentucky, but I'm not real sure yet because the dynamic of my farm changed a lot. We rotated a lot of alfalfa back into tobacco this year, and so the amount of I still have a lot of food, don't get me wrong, but I don't have the abundance of alfalfa now. Whether or not that's affecting how much bachelor group I have, or that it's just tougher for me to get a picture of the bachelor group, if that makes sense. I can't glass the field like I used to be able to see. I was used to seeing 11, 12 bucks, 125 to 145 in August or July and August leading up until September. But just haven't had that yet. So I don't know if they're just not there because of the crops changing, or I just can't see them and haven't gotten a picture of them. But I've gotten quite a few pictures in the food plot of 4 and 5 bucks way out in the distance. You can't really make them out in the trail camera picture, but we'll see. But so far, I still do not have something I'm too overly excited about.
Yeah, I don't either. And there's a couple of camera locations that have always been fantastic in the past with bachelor groups of bucks in the summer. And I'm talking for like the last 8 or 10 years. And this year they've almost died. It's like you get an occasional deer picture there, but the activity is just not what it has been in past years. So it's been a very strange year, and I'm just not seeing the really big bucks. So I'm not, if I had to give a buck, preview or prediction for this fall right now, it does not look good for Giants.
Yeah. I'm not going out on a limb and making any conclusion at this point, but I can tell you that I have a very serious concern about cell cameras this year. After the test that we did last year, my takeaway was that they're a great tool for people to use, but not something that we depend on. I think so far I'm leaning more towards that now than I even did last year. I have, for example, on the lease in Illinois, I have 3 different brands of cell cameras, and they're not cheap ones. They're good cameras with 2 different providers, and I'm still not getting consistent pictures. And you can't – I mean, they're the best cell cameras out there. And time will tell. This week when I'm up in Illinois, I had a gut feeling I'm going to pull cards from the standard cameras. When I was up there a couple weeks ago for the Lester's Feet raffle, I had sinking suspicion of this. So I put a couple standard Reconyx cameras down, 60 yards on the tree lines. And if I go in there and see that there's a bunch of deer traffic there and I'm not getting them, it's going to further prove that great tools, but you can't depend on them. And no matter how good the camera is, I just don't know that the cell technology is really there and stable enough yet to get every picture.
Well, I agree with that 100% too. I've been sorely disappointed in the cameras that I put out in Iowa. I think I've got 7 Reconyx cell cameras over there, and I literally, there's some of those cameras have not produced the picture of a single buck yet. And I thought that, I've been running trail cameras for a while. I thought I knew how to put trail cameras out and get pictures, but, I'm going to go back and check those cards. Maybe some of it's the signal and the camera's taking the picture, but it's just not sending it out. But, I've been really disappointed in those cell cameras that I just bought in the off season and put out for the first time this year. I agree with you. I don't know if the technology is there like people think that it is. And I mean, people put their cameras out and they get pictures. They think that's great. The camera's fine and all that, but what you don't know is how many pictures you're missing.
Yeah.
And that's the key. And, you know, a friend of mine, Greg Mills, who listens to this podcast, he bought a couple of Reconyx cameras from me, not cell cams, just regular cams. And I got a message from him yesterday, and he just couldn't believe how well the Reconyx was working compared to brands he'd used in the past. And he actually put them out with other cameras to test them and said it was just absolutely unbelievable. He'll never buy another brand. And I agree with him on the regular cameras, but I bought those 12 new Reconyx cell cameras. I've just been disappointed in the number of pictures that I've gotten.
Yeah. So it's going to be time will tell, but we've become an instantaneous society where we want that. You know, we got to have answers. We got to have confirmation. We got to have information right now. You know, it's the speed of everything that we get, and I think the trail cameras are playing into that it doesn't make a difference whether we're pulling a card in 3 weeks or we get him one by one. Granted, it does keep intrusion down, and for you in Iowa or me in Illinois, it saves trips and we can keep better track. But I still think that we're using good quality cameras. I still think that if I rely solely on cell technology to dictate what I do, my prediction is I'm going to be pretty disappointed when I go pull the standard cameras on the lease on Wednesday this week. But time will tell. We'll give an update of that next week.
Yep, for sure, and an update later in the summer on our buck prediction for this fall.
Yep. So talk a little bit. You had a big week. Aside from putting out trail cameras, not only did everyone get to see you and the Prodigy West Delks in matching suits, but you had a good time this weekend here.
Yeah, my youngest daughter was married on Friday, and you know, I'm getting old enough that my bucket list is pretty short anymore. But one of the things that I wanted to live long enough that I got to walk both of my daughters down the aisle, and my oldest daughter got married 12 years ago probably, and my youngest one just on Friday. So I got to scratch that off the bucket list, and just so blessed that she married into a fantastic family, the Long family in Indiana, just east of Lafayette, little town, Rossville, Flora. Those two little towns is the area where they live. And, you know, when you give up your daughter in marriage and she's going to a family like that, it's a whole lot easier. The young man she married, Clint Long, is just a fantastic, high quality individual that got his priorities in order and treats her like a queen. So that made it a whole lot easier.
Yep. I don't want to think about those days. I'm still pretty far from it, but I know what it's like when your family surrounds themselves with good people. And did I understand the story right that Wes was the one that introduced them?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow.
And Wes was the best man in the wedding. So
well,
it was quite the deal.
I have not gotten a chance to meet your new son-in-law yet, but if he's anything like your other son-in-law, Corey, you just gained another really good man to take care of your daughters. And as men, we talk about our responsibility to care for our families, both spiritually, but when we can be assured that our daughters are in good hands, I know that means a lot.
Yeah, for sure. You're right. Corey's a fantastic son-in-law too, and a great husband and father to his family. Provides very well for them, and puts them at the top of his priority list. So I've been extremely blessed. I don't have to worry about my kids whatsoever, and I know a lot of people are not that fortunate. So it means a lot to me that these young men, high-quality young men, married my daughters.
There's not many guys that I would rather sit down and have a firearm discussion than with Corey. He is He is a wealth of knowledge, but a super great guy. So I look forward to meeting your new son-in-law at some point in the near future. What was up with your phone this week?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I noticed midweek that I wasn't getting any voicemails, and my phone was ringing, and a lot of times I was busy and couldn't answer it, and sometimes people leave voicemails and sometimes they don't, but I went for about 3 days and didn't get a single voicemail, and when I'm usually getting 10 to 20 a day. And I thought that was weird, and I told my wife, I said, call my phone and see what my voicemail's doing. Well, it was just it was not going to voicemail. It would ring for a while, then it just quit ringing, and nobody was able to leave a voicemail. And I wanted to bring that up here because if someone listening tried calling me and could not leave a voicemail, you should be able to now. I was busy with that wedding and didn't get a chance to go take my phone in to have it checked out and fixed until yesterday. So my phone's back working. If anybody called me and was not able to get me or not able to leave a voicemail, you can now.
Yeah. If there's a setting that makes that go off strategically at specific times, that might be handy for us to have. But in this case, it wasn't intentional.
No.
Well, before we get on to the Don's Best and Worst of the Week segment, I want to talk a little bit about and pick your brain about people doing fall plots. And there's different areas in the country. I posted pictures of my soybean plot in Kentucky this weekend. Probably one of the best spring plots I've ever had. There's other areas that it's not so much. There's some areas that had flooding. I've been seeing up in like Minnesota and the Dakotas and Montana that they're in really bad droughts, and even the big row crop farmers probably lost their entire harvest. There was a big hailstorm that came through, I know, for some of them. So talk a little bit about one of the segments that you say to start this is the best part about a spring plot is if it fails, you have a second chance. If people are looking and worrying about their beans being overbrowsed or they didn't come up or something happened, when should they basically make the decision of what to do? Because everybody goes into panic mode right now wanting to figure it out. We still have a little bit of time to navigate, don't we?
Oh, yeah, especially most of the country. I mean, where we're at in the central Midwest, it's you don't even need to think about planting a plot for about another month. The very earliest that I would plant a fall plot is the last week of August, and we're still a ways out from that. But if you get up north like Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, those areas, you're going to be wanting to think about what you're going to do right now. And a good general rule that I like to follow is the I-70 corridor. I think we've mentioned it on here recently, but if you live along Interstate 70, which cuts right through the heart of the Midwest, you want to plant around the 1st of September. For every 100 miles you go north, you want to move that up a week. So you get 300 miles north of I-70, then you're going to want to plant that, about the first week of August. And that's kind of a rule to follow, but
let me pick your brain specifically about let's give a couple scenarios of people who have submitted questions to us here recently. The first one would be, let's say somebody puts out, say, a 2-3 acre soybean field, and one end of it they've mowed the beans down. The far end of the field, good established beans, but as you get closer to the woods or closer to the bedding area where the deer are coming out, the beans are only maybe 10, 11, 12 inches tall, mowed down really far. They have blooms on it, but it's just not going to be a big plant. Where and when do you make the decision, I need to just go ahead and mow those off, rework it, and put in like a fall blend there if I'm not going to produce a lot? Where's that line at?
Well, I mean, it's an individual choice, and it varies a lot from location to location. But, my rule of thumb with soybeans especially is if you can see the ground, if sunlight is reaching the ground between those soybean plants and it's not totally canopied, then I want to go in there and get another crop growing just to increase the tonnage that I'm producing in that plot. You can do that by working the plot over in, the areas where it's maybe thinner or where the browse has been harder, or you can just overseed with something like Real World's plot topper.
Okay.
Put that in a spreader or one of those extreme blower spreaders and
Right.
and go through your plot and just overseed.
So even a bean plant that's 10 or 12 inches tall, there's a possibility of having 25, 30, 40 pods on that little plant, depending on how it gets browsed.
Right.
You got to have a plant that's 40, 50 inches tall to get up in the 200s, which I've had before. And if my plot is anything like I think it's going to be this year, that's what I'll have. So you're saying that either you can keep what you got and put a plot topper or cereal grain in it, or if you just want to basically till it under to use a product like Deadly Dozen, you really need to work the ground to set those winter peas in.
Yeah, but there are guys that are just going out there with a no-till drill, like a Genesis drill, and drilling right into those soybeans. I mean, at that point, you're tearing up a lot of them, in my opinion. But you can still get away with it.
Okay. So what about the guys that had the flooding and they know that the plants didn't survive? They're really, really struggling. There's some green in the field, but they just know that the field's not going to produce anything. Do they leave the green as long as they can, or do they go ahead and terminate it now and plant the fall plot earlier?
Well, I think in most cases you don't want to plant the fall plot too early, no matter what you're dealing with, because that plant will get too mature and lose its palatability before hunting season. I've got a situation on my farm where I had a corn plot, the Real World NutriCrave corn, and the plot was along a creek, and typically it's fine, but this year we had some big rains, and the creek came out and washed through that plot, and it didn't wash the entire plot away, but just kind of a pattern where the lowest plot or spot in that field or plot got washed away. So there's a big swath through that plot where the corn's gone. And I went in there this week and sprayed that area where the corn's not doing so well. And it's turning brown, and probably if it dries out enough this week, I'll go in there and I'll mow it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably have to spray it again, but then I'll go in with the Genesis drill and drill in Harvest Salad or Deadly Dozen.
As it gets closer to the end of August, though.
Right. Yep. I've already started preparing because the crop was washed away.
Well, it's a topic that I wanted you to kind of elaborate on a little bit, because people put all this work into spring plots and Mother Nature just throws them a curveball and we panic. We just get crazy. We gotta figure out right now what to do. And depending on what your goals and what other food sources are, I think that there's no one answer for every situation, but you do have options. But starting with that, if you're going to replant, starting with a clean seed bed is the perfect way of doing it, but overseeding can be a very good choice also. But we get so impatient that we want to get that out right now that we'll end up doing more damage in late season because those plants mature too fast.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to change the planting date just because you lost your spring plot. To maintain that ideal planting date for your area, whatever it may be. But then, you got your options, overseeding or starting fresh. And I've had to do it both ways. In fact, this year I've got enough plots that some of them will be planted, by starting fresh, and others I'm overseeding. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, the year that you shot Smoky, you lost all of your spring plots to a drought that year. Is that right?
Yep, I did. And the interesting thing is that I've never, in all the years I've been planting food plots, I've had years where the spring conditions were just terrible, and I had my spring plots pretty much fail. And then I've had other years where the fall plots pretty much fail. Last year is a perfect example. I planted them and we didn't get a rain for like 6 weeks. And those seeds germinated, and then a lot of them died because it was just so dry. There was no moisture there. But I've never seen a year where the spring was terrible and then the fall was terrible as well. Usually one of those periods is good, and this year we've had a pretty decent spring. I mean, you mentioned your soybeans, Terry, and how good they look. Well, I've got a fantastic soybean crop, and I've got a really good corn crop too on the higher ground where it didn't get washed away. So I've got that one little patch that I've got to patch in, and so we had in my area anyway, we had a pretty good spring for growing crops.
Right. I think the guys that just are closed-minded that says I'm not going to fool with spring plots, I'm just doing fall. The risk in that is you might not end up with a good season in the fall. So doing a little bit of both, I think, kind of hedges your bet. It's a little bit more of an insurance policy to kind of help you a little bit. Did you see the picture of me standing out in the middle of my soybean field yesterday?
Yeah, I did. They look good.
So
they were up to about your waist.
Yeah, on that end of the field. The other end of the field, they've been browsed a little bit more. I got to remember to grab that cage from you when I'm up there this week. I need to put a utilization cage up in that. I don't have any up right now. But if people go out to my social media, they see that picture. Basically, it is up to my mid-thigh to waist of soybeans. I mean, and it is thick. You can't see anything through it. So at this point, I don't have to worry about weeds coming up underneath of it. There's no light getting to the floor. I had my weed control early, and everything went great. My question now that people ask a lot is, when you have that big of a canopy and you want to double crop, as those beans start to change color and we want to do it fairly early, those beans might not change color until it's really a little bit too late for plot topper. You know what I mean?
Right, and to be honest, in the conditions like you showed in your picture and you just described, where you got a good stand of soybeans and there's absolutely no sunlight getting to the ground, most of the time it's a waste of seed to go out there and try to overseed it.
Yeah, and we're in the business to sell seed with the other company, and we're telling you, you're wasting money. That's where I was going with this. If you just go in and try to broadcast plot topper before those leaves change, because no sunlight's ever going to get down into that dirt.
Right.
So what happens? Does those beans? I think you told me once that those beans kind of that canopy acts almost like a greenhouse. So even without rain, it holds humidity. What happens to that seed when it drops down through? Is it swelling, cracking, and then dying because it doesn't get light?
Well, that's a question for our buddy Dwayne Hopkins. I really can't tell you, but I can tell you from experience that I've tried to overseed into those conditions, and you get absolutely almost nothing. You're lucky to find a single plant. So that seed needs the sunlight too. My guess is that seed germinates, but there's no sunlight there.
Right. It's got enough moisture from the humidity under that canopy that it probably swells and cracks, but then nothing happens.
Right.
So in my case, what I'm probably going to do, I'll still double crop, but I won't use any brassicas. What I'll probably do is when those leaves do fall and I can get sunlight in, I'll go in with like a winter wheat or oats or something, because that'll still germinate late in the year.
Right.
So, okay.
Yep.
Well, I think we're ready. If you're ready to talk about this week's Don's best and worst of the week, do you got anything picked out that we can maybe get on a tyrant about?
Well, I picked a couple things, and the thing of it is, they don't really have much to do with deer hunting, but they do have plenty to do with the world we live in today. So
let's hear
I'll
it.
go ahead and share them. We may not go on too big of a rant since they don't have anything to do with hunting, but the best thing that I seen this week was the U.S. women's soccer team lost. You see that?
Yeah.
And
serves them
the
right.
It's a good thing. Yeah, the reason it's a good thing is because Most of these ladies on this soccer team, I think there was only 3 ladies that stood for the national anthem on that soccer team, and the rest of them took a knee. The one, I don't remember her name, and if I did, I wouldn't want to say it. The one purple-haired freak, she's now the spokeswoman for Subway sandwiches.
Uh-oh.
And yeah, so I'll add Subway to my boycott list. But these anti-Americans are representing the United States in the Olympics, and there was a long string of women's soccer victories. I think it was like, what was it, 48 or some matches that they'd won in a row. They'd just been dominating the world. And these traitors, as I'll call them, lost. And Americans were cheering because they lost, because they've got no business representing our country. So I seen that loss as the best thing I've seen on social media this week.
You're going to go playing games representing our country. That is not the time to try to make a statement like that. I don't know. Serves them right. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. We won't spend much time on that topic. I'll move right on to the work.
All right.
And it's similar. I've seen where the Cleveland Indians changed their name to the Cleveland Guardians. In the interest of political correctness, I guess the fact that they were named the Indians probably offended some pansy liberal somewhere, and they threw a fit, and the Cleveland Indians caved and changed the name. So I think that was one of the worst things I've seen. And you know what? Professional sports, I can't hardly watch it anymore because, and it's not all the players, because there's some really good players that their heart's in the right spot. They use their wealth to do great things. They do things in their communities that are just fantastic. Great people. But, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NFL have all caved to political correctness. And they don't even stand for the values that built this country. And, when you got to change your name to cave into some, radical group, be it Black Lives Matter or whatever, then I've lost all respect for that organization. It's just going right down the list. I mean, those of you that are NBA fans may remember the Washington NBA team was once called the Washington Bullets. Well, they didn't like it being called the Washington Bullets because people were getting shot by guns. Well, who's getting shot with the guns? It killed. Well, it's basically, or who's doing the shooting? It's a bunch of Democrat liberal voters. And so, no longer do we have the Washington Bullets. Now we're the Washington Wizards. It's just been one after another. The Atlanta Braves are probably next on the list to change their name. But it's just disgusting, in my opinion, that we think that by changing the name of a sports team that we're going to somehow correct any wrongdoing that went on in our history. And for that reason, the Cleveland Indians are the worst thing I've seen on the internet this week.
I'm not sure which sport that I saw this on. It might have been USA softball, but they were talking about not taking a knee, and the female said, "Everyone knows where we stand when it comes to social injustice, but now is not the time to disrespect why we're here and who we're playing for." And I thought, that person has it on point. We're not condoning the bad stuff that happens, but you're there representing and being an American for the kind of the tradition of the sport. It's not your time to do that. So tell them to start we need to just tell them to start a podcast. Then they can say whatever they want and use key phrases like you just did. I think purple-haired freak and liberal pansy. Was that what you said? That was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I get kind of fired up because, the thing of it is, a lot of what these groups stand for, most Americans support it. I mean, there's not a one of us that I know. I don't have a single friend that I know of who ever supported slavery in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
We're all disgusted that this country ever had slavery. But, tearing down statues and changing the names of sports teams is not ever going to change the fact that it happened.
Yep.
In fact, they're trying to erase that from history. Well, don't we want to remember that so we never repeat it again? That would be my thought. I mean, it's like the Holocaust, they want to pretend like that never happened. The Jews don't, believe me, or most people don't. But some of these liberals want to pretend like the Holocaust never happened, so that they're trying to erase history. And you can't erase history. In fact, you should remember it so you don't repeat it.
Yeah,
okay, end of my rant, Terry.
Purple-haired freak. So with that, why don't we move on to the buyafarm.com property of the week?
Buyafarm.com is your source for farm, recreational properties, rural homes, and more. Now, here is Don Higgins with this week's featured property.
Okay, for this week's featured property, I picked out one for our Amish listeners. I know we got a lot of Amish listeners. We hear from them a lot. So this one is a 40-acre Amish homestead in Crawford County, Illinois. It's only about 5 miles north of Oblong, Illinois. And this 40-acre homestead has 2 homes and a barn on it. It's been fenced in into 4 paddocks or 4 pasture areas for, horses and livestock. Both of these are newer homes built in 2019. The main home is a 3-bedroom home, and the second one is a 2-bedroom home. The barn is a concrete block construction with a concrete floor, 6 open stalls, 4 closed stalls. There's even a milk station for some milk cows. You can get on the buyafarm.com website and see a lot of pictures of this homestead, but the thing that really struck me was it's got 2 new homes built in 2019, and the asking price, I just couldn't believe how cheap it was. I'm not sure why this place is being sold, but there is I know there's several Amish in that Oblong, Illinois area, and I know it's kind of typical in the Amish communities that younger couples will move to other Amish areas, around the country. And if someone is looking to move, they really need to take a look at this 40-acre homestead in Crawford County, Illinois, because, the buildings are new, and you're not going to find a better price. I can tell you the fact that I'm building a new home this summer, I'm going to have about 4 times in my home what they're asking for this 40 acres and 2 homes.
Yeah.
So you really need to take a look at that. You can call Wayne Keller if you got questions. Wayne's phone number is 618-407-1679. And tell Wayne that you heard about it on Chasing Giants, and I'm sure he'll be glad to assist you in any way that he can.
So with everybody who just got a pen handy, why don't you repeat Wayne's phone number for him just one more time?
Okay, Wayne's phone number is 618-407-1679.
The lumber prices that have happened in the last year, it's a horrible time to build a house. I know you guys were able to go ahead and do it, but my goodness, it's finding a newer home that's this new that you can get into and not have to pay these lumber prices might be a deal to look at. So I encourage you guys to go give Wayne a call. For those of you with internet access, look at buyafarm.com, and we appreciate their help. Before we move on to the questions this week, we've alluded to that I'm coming up this week. Unfortunately, I had a change in schedule. I have to work tomorrow and not sure what time I'm going to get out. We asked a lot of our listeners, and we had a crazy amount of people say that they wanted us to do the podcast on video. We didn't know what time I was going to get in tomorrow night, so we didn't want to delay it till Tuesday or Wednesday, so that's why we're doing it tonight. But we're going to go visit our friends at Lone Wolf this week. It's going to be fun to go catch up with those guys.
Yeah, they've been great sponsors. Jeff Weaver and Frank Archie and Caden and the guys at Lone Wolf have been really good to us, and we're going to go pay them a visit this week. And while you're here, we're going to spray some food plots and put out some cameras and who knows what else.
I hope that they're going to be able to tolerate me on the manufacturing floor, because that starts getting into my wheelhouse when I start seeing how machining and manufacturing gets made. So they better be ready for a little bit of time that I want to spend out on the floor. I've never been there to actually see the assembly process, so I'm really looking forward to that. So that'll be this week. If we get a chance or get something that we want to talk about, we might jump on Facebook Live or something maybe, but we'll just see how it goes. So for those of you who gave us feedback and said we wanted to do it, we're going to try to do that more. We couldn't quite swing it this week for you. So hope you understand. But let's move on to the listener submitted questions. These people are going to end up getting a free Chasing Giants shirt shipped. I almost said a bad word there by accident. Shipped to them here in the near future for submitting a question. So for our new listeners, if you go to chasinggiants.com and submit a question and we use it on air, Don will send you a free Chasing Giants t-shirt. So what do we got to talk about today?
Our first question comes from Jacob Kopaska. I hope I said his name right, from Coon Rapids, Iowa. Jacob says, "Hello, Don. I recently planted 5 apple trees and 2 pear trees on some property I hunt. Will different varieties of apple trees cross-pollinate with each other, and will they pollinate the pear trees? I planted 3 Red Baron apple, 2 Golden Delicious apple, and 2 Bartlett pear. I really enjoy the podcast. Thank you." Jacob, first of all, apple trees will not pollinate pear trees. The Bartlett pears, those should be self-pollinating. I think it'd be fine there. When it comes to apple trees, and they'll definitely cross-pollinate. The key there is the timing of the bloom. So if you've got 2 varieties that bloom at the same time, they'll definitely cross-pollinate. And, an interesting topic, while we're talking about these fruit trees is selecting varieties. I know you named the varieties that you had planted, but I get a lot of questions on, what varieties of apple trees should I plant? And what you want to do is just go to the internet and look for an apple chart. They have charts that list the different varieties of apples, and they have the ripening dates. A lot of those charts are in order by ripening dates, and there's a graph off to the side that gives basically when those apples will ripen on those trees. And you want to look for the later ripening varieties that are going to, ripen, say, after October 1st when archery season opens in most states. But then you're going to want to cross-reference that with another chart. There will be another chart basically on disease resistance, and there's a handful of different diseases that apple trees are susceptible to, but one of the worst ones from a food plotter standpoint or a wildlife manager standpoint is cedar apple rust fungus. It's a fungus that goes back and forth between cedar trees and apple trees. And, a lot of deer farms have a lot of cedars on them. And so you're going to need a variety that's resistant to that cedar apple rust fungus. So what I do as far as selecting varieties, I'll go into the internet, find that chart, make a list of the latest ripening varieties, and then I will go to the disease resistance chart and see which varieties are resistant to which diseases, paying special attention to cedar apple rust. But there's others like apple scab and things, and the more resistant or the more issues or diseases that an apple variety is resistant to, the better off you're going to be. So I get a lot of questions about selecting which varieties. I can name a few right off the top of my head that are really good: Enterprise, Liberty, Freedom. Those are 3. Arkansas Black is another good one. There's several that are really good, but that's how you determine which varieties are best. Another thing that you want to do when you're planting apple trees, or you might want to consider anyway, is there's there's a couple of varieties of crab apples, and the crab apple will cross-pollinate with the apples as well. 2 varieties of crab apple to keep in mind are Dolgo, Dolgo, Dolgo crabapple, and chestnut crabapple. Those crabapple trees will just be loaded with blooms. They'll have a lot more blooms than it will. It'll cross pollinate really well. So consider throwing in a few crabapples with your apple plantings.
That's great information. So maybe here in the near future we can probably share that. We can find that chart and share it on it for everyone if they want to get quick reference to it or something. We can try to do that in the near future to give some people, because the time to start planting that, you want to plant your fruit trees in the late fall, early spring. When's the transplant?
The time to plant any tree is during that period when it's dormant, when it's lost its leaves. The bad habit a lot of people have is to wait till spring and plant their trees after they've already leafed out in the pot or whatever. You want to plant those trees when they're dormant. So anytime, like say from about the 1st of November up until about the 1st of April, here where I'm at, is ideal.
Okay.
But most guys don't want to be planting in the fall when they're deer hunting. But now's the time to be planting. Go to those sites exactly where you're going to plant your trees, stick flags in the ground where each tree is going to go, and then come in with the herbicide and spray a 5-foot diameter circle around each of those flags. So when you go in to plant, you're not fighting vegetation. It's all dead and bare ground.
Right.
So.
But to source those trees, they have to order them. And have that ready. So we'll try to post that chart and find it here in the next week or two for everybody who follows you on social media. So what's our next question?
Next one comes from Luke McCoy from Marion, Iowa. Luke says, "Hi, Don and Terry. Thank you so much for pouring into the hunting community your collective years of knowledge and for helping us grow in our faith along the way. I've hunted public land in eastern Iowa since I started. The common advice given for public land hunting is get at least a mile from the parking area. So that's what I've done. I've found less human sign and more deer sign, but it hasn't equated to any giants yet. My limited experience is proving that you're 100% correct. Human intrusion is the worst, and access is everything. But public land is nothing but human intrusion, and access is mostly challenging. My question is this: when you're weighing options on public land, what compromises, if any, are you willing to make? Oh, that's a great question. I won't make a compromise. I mean, you got to have good access, and you got to get away from human intrusion. It's a whole lot harder to do on public land because you have no control over what anyone else is doing. The entire world basically is free to come and go as they choose, and most people, or most deer hunters even, are not that mindful of their access routes, and they're just going out there looking for the most deer sign, and that's where they're sticking their tree stand, and then how they get to it is the shortest walk possible. I talked a while back about, on public land, I call it the sandwich effect. You either got to go way in on that public land, or you got to stay real close to the road. And that in the middle is where most of the hunting takes place. So I've got a camera right now on public land in Illinois. That camera is within probably 60 yards of a parking area in one direction, and it's probably within 60 yards of a road in another direction. But it's a little pocket of cover that it's the type of place that the deer hunter would overlook. It's just not that big. It's too close to the parking area, and it's too close to the road. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking for. And I want to throw out something else, Luke, because you say you're in eastern Iowa, and I've made no secret of the fact that I'm going to be hunting eastern Iowa this fall in Zone 8. And I want to say that I am extremely disappointed in what I've seen in Iowa. I've heard about Iowa being the land of the giants all these years, and I know there's big bucks in Iowa, and it's as good as anywhere. But a lot of the cameras I've got out right now are on public land, and I have yet to get a picture of a single buck over about 130 inches on public land in Iowa. Iowa's got a lot of public land. In fact, last time I went out there with West Delks, we was on about 7 different tracts of public land. If I have one complaint with the Iowa DNR, it's that they take these public tracts and they do everything they can to make them accessible. They mow paths everywhere, and they plant food plots in very easy to access locations. But the main thing they do is they just make the entire tract easily accessible to any hunter. And when it comes to big bucks, they're doing just the opposite of what needs to be done. There needs to be some huge tracts that are just left untouched. And the ones that I'm seeing in the eastern Iowa, that's not the case at all. They're in there, mowing these trails for hunters to be able to get to the back of the property. And in the process, they're making the site less attractive, especially to older mature bucks. So it's a challenge for sure. And that's about the best advice that I can give you.
Interesting. Very cool.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. We got one more.
All right.
The last one comes from Kyle Watson, and Kyle's from Sparta, Illinois. Kyle says, Don and Terry, love the podcast and everything you guys are doing for the sick children around the country. Okay, so I have heard you talk a lot about switchgrass planting techniques throughout the years. In my county in southern Illinois, they have finally raised the rental rates for a 2022 late winter, early spring CRP planting that I have been approved for warm season grass coverage. I plan on buying all my seeds for my 13 acres of CRP through a seed distributor for real world wildlife products here in my area. With all this being said, I have never really heard you talk about how to plant after a corn year. Our family farm is 120 acres with about 52 acres of row crop corn stalks, from which my 13 acres of 3 CRP fields will be taken from. I know you say switchgrass drilled or broadcast in bean stubble in late winter is the best situation. I plan on mowing the stalks down after corn is shelled, then going to try to no-till or broadcast in. Am I on the right track, or should these acres be disked thoroughly and cultipacked? I also plan on buying seed this fall so I can do my own stratification freezer trick for a better stand the first year. Note this does work. I planted some strips 2 years ago after the first year. The switchgrass was 5 feet tall with a near perfect stand. Thanks for your professionalism and your informational podcast. Best of luck this fall, fellas. Thanks again. Well, Kyle, I don't know if you follow me on social media, but I've planted new plantings of switchgrass on my farm the last 2 springs, and I used 2 different methods. A year ago, I sprayed the field. It was both of these were old CRP fields with grasses that I'd planted years ago that just did not stand, and I wanted to replace those with the real world switchgrass. The one I burned the field off a year ago. When it greened back up, I sprayed it. I let it get what I thought was a good kill. Then I went in with a mold board plow and I turned the soil over, and then I disked it up, cultipacked, broadcast the seed, and then cultipacked again. That worked fair at best. And the biggest issue that I had there was that that spraying and that mold board plow did not kill the existing CRP grasses. The roots were still alive, and a lot of that stuff came right back and competed with the new switchgrass that I'd broadcast. So that method did not work so well. Although there is plenty of switchgrass growing out there, it's got a lot of competition from the grass that had previously been there as well. So this spring, I had another field I wanted to do the same thing to, and I tried a totally different method, which I've detailed with video. I video documented each step of the process, and I'm going to be producing a video before next planting season on how to go about this. But I started by burning that field and then letting it green up. And once it greened up, I let it green up really good, and the grasses and stuff were, probably pushing 12 inches tall. And I went in with a very strong dose of Roundup and with a good surfactant in it, as well as atrazine as a residual to prevent a lot of weeds. And I sprayed that, and it toasted it brown, and then a little bit of it started coming back. I waited a good probably 45 days after that first spraying, and gave them those plants that have been sprayed a chance to either die or recover, and some of them recovered. And so I went in and I did a second spraying, and again I used a very heavy dose of Roundup with a surfactant. I did not use atrazine the second time, but I sprayed it again. And right after I sprayed it, like a day or two later, I went in with my Genesis drill, and I drilled the seed in, and I used seed that I'd done the freezer method of stratification that you talked about. And I'm talking, by the time I got that second spraying on there, we were into late May. And so the seed that I'd had in my freezer off and on all winter, I'd have it in the freezer for a week or two, then I'd take it out for a week or two, then I'd throw it back in for a week or two. And I did that process clear up until the time when I planted it. And I got the best stand of switchgrass that I've ever had. Now, your question relates more to planting into corn stalks. I would do basically the same thing. I would go into your corn stalks in the spring as early as possible, and I would spray, a good dose of Roundup to kill any weeds that come on, and I would put a residual, either simazine or atrazine, in with that Roundup, spray it all at once, and then immediately go right in and no-till that switchgrass seed into those corn stalks. You don't need to worry about disking or anything like that. You can mow them if you want to, but you'll be fine. Just get that seed drilled in. That drill will put that seed right against the soil. You won't have to worry about it being on top of those corn stalks or anything. And if you do that, you should have a great stand of switchgrass. One other thing from your that I want to comment on that was in your submitted question was about buying the seed early for that freezer stratification process. Real World has been selling out of our variety of switchgrass every year. And to my knowledge, I don't think there's another acre of that stuff being harvested for seed, that particular variety, anywhere in the country, because we have exhausted every effort that we can to find more of this seed of this particular switchgrass variety. You're not going to be able to buy that Real World switchgrass and probably until about late December, because that crop has to be harvested this fall. Then the seed has to be cleaned and bagged. It has to also be sent to a lab for a test, a germination test, which the germination rates and all that is put on that seed tag. So by the time all that gets done and we've got it ready to distribute, sell to our customers, send to our dealers, whatever, you're going to be looking at least December or maybe even early January, but that's fine. That still gives you plenty of time. You're going to have at least 3 months of that seed going back and forth from your freezer and out, where you're going to get a good stratification and should get a fantastic stand of switchgrass that first year. The planting that I just described that I did this year, I did not get that planting in the ground until late May, and I've got a fantastic stand of switchgrass right now. It's only 2 months later, and then that switchgrass is pushing knee high in 2 months from planting, which is basically unheard of. I've never seen it grow that fast before. Now, some of that is the fact that it was planted later and the soil temperature was already warm, but you should have a fantastic stand of switchgrass as long as you can get those weeds controlled. That's going to be your key next year. Those corn stalks are not going to be a problem at all. You just need to stay on top of those weeds.
All right. That's a great question. when you're spending that much money on investment for your habitats, it's a long-term solution. You want to make sure and do it right. So I think it's a great question and very thorough answer on that one.
Well, I think this video that we're going to produce, I've spent the whole summer every step of the way. My good buddy James Morgan has been coming out, and each step of the way he's been bringing his video camera and video documenting each thing that we've done. And there's a couple things that I didn't mention here. One was after that switchgrass came up, we started to get some weed growth with it. And I went back in and sprayed over the top of it with 2,4-D and quinclorac. And I noticed some comments on social media that people said they didn't think you could spray young switchgrass planting with 2,4-D. You absolutely can. You need that switchgrass to have 4 blades or leaves on it. You can't spray it when just barely coming out of the ground a hair tall. But once it gets into that 4-leaf stage, you're fine as long as you don't have a too heavy a dose. But, I went in and cleaned up that field with 2,4-D and quinclorac and totally wiped out all the weed competition. And that's the reason this field has done so well is, we've had plenty of moisture this year, but there's been no weed competition.
Right. Okay. Well, this week's going to be a busy week. I'm heading up tomorrow, and we'll touch base with people via social media and tell them what we're up to, especially when we're up visiting our friends at Lone Wolf. So looking forward to that, and we got some kind of sanity checks to do on these cell cameras here this week and over the next couple weeks. So I'm kind of interested to see how that goes. So even when I'm worried, even if we invest in the good stuff, there's still we still can't rely on them. So that's where my gut is right now. Hopefully I'm wrong.
Well, I think you're right. And, it's until you've seen a good camera and used a good camera, it's hard to realize what you're missing. And like my buddy Greg Mills said in his message to me today or yesterday, he couldn't believe the difference and how many pictures he'd been missing in the past. And he said he'll never buy another camera except for Reconyx. But I'll be honest, I don't want to get into a bunch of naming brands and this one's good and this one's not, but I've got one cell camera that's a Exodus, and I'm impressed with that one. It's held its own against Reconyx, that's for sure.
Right.
But it might be, just where it's located and the signal it's getting too.
Yep, I think that might be part of it. So, everybody, it's just warning everybody. It's a great tool. We're not saying it's not. It's an absolute great tool to keep intrusion down. It's a great tool to use when we're not close, and it's a fun thing to play around with and watch. But we're going to find out real quick here whether it's something we can rely on as our only intel. So should be interesting. So I will see you tomorrow night, and we'll check in with everybody via social media here sometime this week. Why don't you take us out with your sponsors?
Okay, we want to thank our sponsors, BuyAFarm.com, Victory Chevrolet, 360 Hunting Blinds, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Lone Wolf Tree Stands, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, Vortex Optics, and Vengeance Camo. I hope everyone has a great week.
Take care.